Hey, Steve Jolly with the Home Buying Skills channel, and on today's show we're going to talk about should you buy a condo and rent it out. Are you ready to get started? Let's get to business. Now, the first thing we want to talk about is some of the rules of the road for buying a condo, especially as an investment property. And the first one you want to know is you don't want to buy all of the properties in the same development. And that's because if they're all governed by the same HOA, that doesn't really leave you diversified enough. That leaves you exposed to some liabilities. For one, if the HOA decided to change the rules and not allow any rentals, or two, if the HOA wasn't managing their money properly and got heavily in debt, or wasn't able to keep the maintenance and the repairs of the exterior of the properties in place. So you want to be careful. You want to make sure you diversify and don't put all your eggs in one basket. So that's the first rule of the road. Let's get down to number two. And the second rule of the road is let the market dictate your investment type. For example, if not many people are renting condos in your area, you probably don't want to buy one as an investment property to rent out. That's because the demand for those homes isn't matching up to the supply of those homes. So make sure you let the market dictate to what you want. So if you look and there are a shortage of certain type of homes or certain homes in a certain development, that's what you want to look for. You want to look for opportunities. You want to look for hungry clients. People are hungry for a new place to live, and that's what you should be looking for. So let the market dictate what type of investment property that you buy. And the third rule, and this is a personal one for me, and I would say only invest in properties that you would live in personally. And so you may have to lower your standards a little bit from what you live in now, but I wouldn't buy anything that I wouldn't live in personally because I wouldn't feel comfortable renting that out to somebody else. And plus, you don't want to have tons of repairs and maintenance costs. You want to keep this thing simple to operate, especially if you're going to manage it on yourself. So only buy properties that you would live in yourself. And just because I suggest that you only buy properties that you would live in, that does not mean they have to be Class A properties. They could be Class B or Class C condominium. It doesn't really matter as long as there are people in your area looking to rent a property in that price range and in that condition, in that development. And the last rule of the road, and to me it's one of the most important ones, that you need to find your why. Are you doing this to create wealth? Are you doing this to get a property that really appreciates in value? Or are you doing this for the income? Are you trying to get some mailbox money? Or you may be doing it for a combination of both of those reasons. But you need to find your why on the front end because that'll help dictate the properties that you're looking at, and that'll help you better decide if this is the right property that you want to purchase. All right, for a minute, let's talk about HOAs. Now, I mentioned earlier you didn't want to buy properties that were all in the same HOA, and that's because there's a lot of different things that can happen, and they have control over, and they have a say-so in what you can and cannot do with your property. And that's why you want to be very careful in buying a property for investment, especially if it has an HOA that governs the development. And because they have a say-so in your property, they write the rules and regulations that everybody has to live under. And that not only governs what happens on the exterior of the property, but that can also govern what happens inside your property. So they may decide, hey, that you can't rent out a room of your property. You have to either rent the whole thing or not. And that might not be what you want to do. A lot of people want a house hack, and maybe they'll buy a condominium and rent out one bedroom to somebody else to help make that mortgage payment. HOA can tell you you can't do that. So you have to be careful. You have to read the rules and regulations. They can also tell you that you can't rent it out at all, or that only so many people can rent out condos in the development. So you really have to dig into the rules and regulations and make sure you understand them before you buy that investment property. You also have to understand that those rules and regulations can be changed at any time. So you need to keep an eye on the board. You need to know who your HOA board is, and you need to follow what they're doing, read their minutes, read their financials, especially if you're investing in that and you're not in the neighborhood every day to hear the gossip and the news from your neighbors. Now, there are other concerns about HOAs that you need to know, but these are the most important ones, and these are the ones that are really going to affect you with an investment property. Now, let's talk about financing for a minute. Financing for investment property is a little bit different than financing for your own personal property. And because of that, you can't just put, in most cases, 5% down or 10% down to purchase an investment property. In most cases, you're going to have to put down 20 or 25% or maybe even more to purchase an investment property. And that's because the bank wants some collateral to make sure that you are actually going to pay the mortgage when it comes time to every month. You also want to have a little bit of cushion because there can be some repairs and maintenance that are needed. There's going to be some unexpected repairs and maintenance that come up. Things that you don't know about when you buy the property, but you're going to have to deal with at a moment's notice when your client has a plumbing issue or when their HVAC breaks down or when they have some other kind of issue that they need to be attended immediately. Another way to get financing for your investment property is take out a HELOC on your personal home. And a HELOC is a home equity line of credit. And a lot of people will do that. They'll buy an investment property, they'll use their HELOC, they'll renovate the property, they'll go then and get a traditional mortgage and they'll pay their HELOC back off so they can do that process again. So a HELOC can be a tool if you own a personal property and you have a lot of equity in it, that you can tap into some of that equity and use for your down payment or use to renovate the next property that you purchase. So keep that in mind. A HELOC is a great opportunity. With a HELOC, you don't have to go to an investor to get money for your down payment if you don't have it already. Your house becomes your investor. And so that's a great thing about a HELOC. So keep that in mind. There's also some great other options for investing. They depend greatly on where you're going to purchase, what your financial condition is, and whether you're self-employed or you work for somebody else. Now let's talk about property management, because most people think you buy an investment property, you close on it, you get some tenants in there, and every month after that, all you do is collect money in your mailbox. And while that's true, there are a lot of other headaches and hassles and things that you have to deal with. And so you need to decide if you're going to manage this property on your own or if you're going to hire a professional manager. And so one of the things, if you're going to manage it on your own, one of the things you're going to have to do is find tenants, find good tenants, find credit-worthy tenants, find tenants who are going to pay every month and not destroy your property. And that's not always easy. And there's other things that you can do to help you, but that's one of the things you need to consider. That you're going to have to find tenants and get them to sign a lease agreement to lease the property. And then once you have them sign that agreement and they move in, they're going to have to start paying rent. So you're going to have to collect rent some way. And you can decide how you want to do it. You can use electronically or old-fashioned means, but you're going to have to find a way to collect that rent on a consistent basis, because if you're not doing it, there's no reason to buy investment property. The third thing you need to worry about is repairs and maintenance and managing those things. You're going to want to have a network of vendors that you can rely on, that you can call on for emergency repairs or maintenance on the property. But there's other things that you're going to want to do in between tenants, maybe renovate the property, maybe go in and fix a few things that needed to be done that you couldn't get done while the last tenant was in there. And so you're going to want a network of all different kind of vendors that you can rely on, that can come in quickly, do the work, that you can trust that they're going to do it right and do it right the first time. And they're going to show up on time. So you need to get that network of vendors. And the best way to start is early. And really, you need to always be looking for vendors, because people get in and out of this business. They decide they want to do certain things one day and the next day they don't. So you really need to always work and keep that list of vendors going, because that will help you in this part of the process, which can be a huge headache if you're trying to manage it for yourself. Now, over the last few years, some apps came out that you can use even on your telephone that can help you manage this process of getting tenants and collecting rent and doing credit checks and background checks and all those types of things you need to do to be a responsible investor. And so apps and other software that you can buy on your computer will help you immensely with this. If that's the way you want to go, I would highly recommend it. If you don't feel like you're tech savvy, there are probably some easier apps that you can use that'll help you and make this process a whole lot easier. So if you have questions about that, you can always reach out to me and I'll point you in the right direction. Now, if all this sounds like too much of a headache and hassle for you, don't think that that doesn't mean you're not ready to be an investor. What that means is you probably just need to hire a property manager. And yes, it is costly, and it may cost you a month's worth of rent on the front end and maybe 10% of your rent for the rest of the term of the lease, but they're going to take care of all these headaches and hassles and make your life easier. So all you really have to do is open that mailbox every month and deposit that check. So if these things that I talked about on managing the property yourself, if they seem too difficult or seem like that's not something that you want to do, then by all means hire a property manager, ask around, get some recommendations, find a good one that is reliable and you can trust on, and that has a good program in place that they're going to walk through the process. They're going to tell you what they're going to do to earn their money. And the good ones will really earn their money, and the bad ones will really cost you money. So be careful when selecting a property manager. So one area where a lot of people struggle is they don't really know how to analyze a rental property financially to make sure, is this going to be a good investment for me, or is this going to be a terrible investment for me? Or am I just going to break even? You know, which of those scenarios is most likely to happen? And so you want to find out, it doesn't necessarily mean any of them are bad, but you need to understand going in on the front end what you're getting into. And I'll explain all that in a minute. But the first thing you're going to want to do is your investment needs to make sense from the very beginning. The value should just jump off the table. If you're having to count pennies to make sure you're going to be profitable every month or profitable 10 years down the road, then this is probably not a good investment for you. But it should jump off the table using some simple math that I'll talk about here in a minute to explain to you how you can look at it from a couple different scenarios and see if that's a good investment for you. And then if it is, then you can dive deeper in the numbers and find out exactly what you think you're going to make a month and set some goals for yourself. Before we dive into these formulas, the one thing you're going to think about is you need to decide this. Am I after appreciation, or am I after income, or am I after a combination of both? And you have to decide what you're really looking for, because that's going to decide how you're going to value these properties. Because if it's all in appreciation, basing your numbers on the rent isn't really going to help you decide if that's a good decision or not. And if it's all on the rent and you really want some appreciation, you need to factor that in too, because that's important down the road, especially if you're in a hot market where prices are appreciating. That adds value, that adds to your wealth, that adds to your generational wealth, and you're going to want to know how much that is. Now, to get started, let's dig in and talk about the 1% rule. And here's what the 1% rule is. Your monthly rent that you should be able to collect on this investment property should be approximately 1% of the value of the home. So if you can rent a home for $2,000 a month, you should be looking for a home that's priced approximately $200,000. So $2,000 is 1% of the total value of the house, which is $2,000. So what that means is you're going to get a pretty good return on your investment. Here in Nashville, it's going to be really hard to hit that 1% number because the price of homes is so high, and it's been that way for several years. You're probably going to be closer to about 0.5%, and that's probably true in most of the popular markets around the nation where the supply is still outstripping the demand. If you can get more than 1% on the 1% rule, that's a good thing. So the higher the number is better. This formula really helps you compare one property to another that are very similar and see which one is going to be the best investment for you on a pure monthly rent basis. And if you do this calculation and you're not hitting the 1% rule, if you're at 0.5%, then you really need to be in a market that has some appreciation, like Nashville or Austin or Denver or places like that that are really booming, Atlanta, places where rental property are going to appreciate to make up for some of that difference you're not going to get in cash flow. Another way to look at an investment property is using what some people call the GRM, or the gross rent multiplier. And that's where you take the price of the property and you divide it by the gross annual rent that you would collect on that property. Now, in this case, the lower the number is better for you. And this is another way that you can help compare properties and decide which one is really going to bring you the most gross rent. Now, if you want to dig in a little deeper, you're going to have to look at the cap rate. So the cap rate measures the property's ability to produce income. To calculate the cap rate, you're going to take the annual net operating expenses, which is the gross rent on an annual basis, minus your operating expenses, and you're going to divide that number by the total purchase price of the property. And that's going to give you your cap rate. And the cap rate will also help you compare properties, but it's also going to tell you what kind of opportunity costs you have, because it's bringing in that expenses that sometimes when you're doing just a 1% rule, that you leave that out. And if property has high expenses because it needs repair and maintenance, you really need to factor that in. So those are 3 easy ways to get an off-the-cuff answer to whether this is a good investment property or not. And if it meets those 3 rules, or it looks good on 1 or 2 of those rules, then it's time to investigate a little bit further. Using one of those rules, it should jump off the page to you that this is a great investment property. Like I said earlier about the gross rent multiplier, if you're not happy with the cap rate that you're getting on an investment property, dig in deeper and look at the appreciation for that property and what you can expect to get over the next 5 years or 10 years or however long you expect to hold that property. Does that appreciation make up for some of that income the property is not producing? If it does, then it may be a great property for you, but you really need to look at, especially when there's a low cap rate, if you're in a hot market, you need to factor in that appreciation, because that's going to put money in your pocket. Maybe not today, but in the end, in the long run, it's going to put money in your pocket. or it's going to build equity where you can tap some of that with a HELOC. One other way to gain equity and profit in a rental property is to make some repairs, some maintenance, some renovations of the property. Step the class of the property up where you can raise the rent to a higher level. It'll make the property more valuable, especially in the eyes of the lender, and you'll be able to utilize some of that equity to use on this property or on some other property. I hope you enjoyed today's video on home buying. If you liked the video, click the like button to let me know that you enjoyed it. If you have any specific questions, leave them in the comment section below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you'll never miss one of our videos. Take care.